guys, what's going on? You are listening to ThisWeekInGeek.net, and this is, of course, Botched Roll. This is the role-playing game show dedicated to the hobby of role-playing games, tabletop RPGs, maybe even some mini wargaming here and there, but mostly us going out there pretending to be adventurers, saving the far realms, delving into deep space, or perhaps walking across the 31st century in giant battle mechs. I'm your host, Mike the Birdman, and well, today is the eve before Free RPG Day 2024, and it's an exciting time. If you've been following the Free RPG Day X account, aka Twitter, I'm still not sure what to call that website. You've seen they've been previewing a lot of really cool stuff. You may have seen some stuff on my social media over the last couple of weeks that I've been taking a look at, like some of their stuff. I got sent a wonderful press kit from their contact, Steve. Steve, you're a hero. I love this stuff. But I decided that I wanted to find out a little bit more about Free RPG Day, just because, well, I love doing interviews. I love talking to people. I love making contacts. And I was fortunate enough to be connected via Steve from Free RPG Day to talk with Paul Alexander Butler. He is one of the managing partners and one of the people who now helps run Free RPG Day, but he also runs one of the largest and best gaming stores on the East Coast, Games and Stuff. What a wonderful name. I love it. You can visit their website at gamesandstuffonline.com. They also have an eBay store you can check out. So without any further ado, let's welcome Paul Alexander Butler to the show.
Hello, how's it going?
It is going amazing. I am so glad to get a chance to talk to someone about Free RPG Day. This is sort of one of those days in the calendar I look forward to each year as a dork.
Me
not
too.
Gonna lie, it's one of those days where I'm like, I get to see new people that are coming into the hobby. I get to see old people I don't get a chance to see too often. And just because of the way that it seems like the hobby's really been embraced, especially in the last couple years, and now that we're post-COVID, people are starting to get together again. Gaming tables are starting to expand, but there's so many online game mastering services that the hobby seems more accessible now than it ever has been. So having a chance to speak with someone like you, who's not only a person who's now heavily involved, but you run a retail location. So I'm wondering what that looks like on Free RPG Day, because obviously if you're selling this stuff, you got to be into it somewhat. So what has it been like watching Free RPG Day as a retailer? And then we'll talk about you as a fellow hobbyist.
Well, okay, so I'm one of the owners of Free RPG Day as of 2019, and prior to that, I had actually been involved behind the scenes of the event for a couple of years. So we're going to turn back the clock and pretend like I don't have anything to do with Free RPG Day. So just as a retailer back then, the thing that always sticks out to me, and the things that I talk to other retailers that are interested about running the thing, is that there are very few opportunities to celebrate role-playing games as a retail store above all else. As a retailer, it's real easy to, host your big Warhammer 40K tournament or do your big pre-releases for Magic. But there's nothing on the calendar that says role-playing games are important and role-playing game players matter, and they matter the most today. So what Free RPG Day does, it's an opportunity for stores to celebrate role-playing games above all else. No more, particularly for smaller stores, no more, role-playing games getting kicked to the curb because there's a Magic event or something like that. Free RPG Day is for role players. So traditionally, it has always been a box full of cool stuff. It is exclusive adventures or quick starts, and it is a way to introduce players to games they haven't played before, or just introduce people to role playing in general. What I quickly found is the best way for as a retailer to really make Free RPG Day thing is to treat it like a mini convention, a mini role playing game convention. Now, forgive me, I wear multiple hats, so sometimes I'm going to sound like the owner of Free RPG Day as opposed to the retailer, but that's how it's going to go. So there are often times when retailers will just sort of put stuff out on the table and give it away for free, and that's what they do, and that's great. And if that works for them, fantastic. But oftentimes, stores have complained that it doesn't really there's not a lot of ROI. There's not a lot of return on investment for their energy doing this. And I always say,
Mhm.
you get out of it what you put into it. So what we have done for years at this point is, yes, of course, we've got tables full of stuff that we're giving away for free, but we're also scheduling demo games of the games that are featured in the box. We're running those throughout the day. This year, I think we're up to 5 sessions that run 11 to 3, and then another 5 sessions that run from 4 to 8. Obviously, limited attendance at those tables because, nature of role playing is that, while some people are crazy to do it, I don't recommend trying to play with 12 players. So we've got a bunch of different events going all day long. We also use it as an opportunity because we are celebrating role playing games in a way that we often don't throughout the rest of the year. We use it as an opportunity to sale price some stuff. Or my store, for example, does a lot with used role playing games. So used and collectible stuff, we'll sale price all of that. We just use the kit as a foundation, as a starting point to have a huge store wide role playing game celebration. And we get people that come out specifically for the event. People look forward to it every year, and it's usually one of our better days of the year, both from attendance perspective and just the cash register.
I've got to say, like, I've been to a couple of free RPG days, and now where I live in Southern Ontario, Canada, they finding a store was a little bit difficult, especially during the pandemic years. But recently, my local game store, The Dragon, which is located where I currently live in Guelph, Ontario, they've signed up this year, and you have no idea how happy that makes me to see, as you mentioned, role players really getting their due. Because obviously you go into a large gaming store, it's always Warhammer minis, maybe some battle tech, magic, Pokemon cards, etc. But the role-playing game section, it's always tucked away in one corner, and my local
Yep.
game store has really gone out of their way to make sure people can see the role-playing games that are offered. Like, it's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. There's a lot of Pathfinder's Paizo, but even locally, we have a gentleman who did the Big Eyes Small Mouth locally. Mark McKinnon, I believe, is his name, and it's cool to see his stuff up there. There's always tons of minis. They run D&D on the weekends, and I've been asking them all year, are you guys going to do it? And eventually, I got the answer back was a resounding yes. And it's exciting to see so many people come out into the hobby now. I mean, obviously, we've had huge successful shows online, such as Critical Role. Now there's an animated series of Vox Machinima. There is like tons of actual play role play podcasts. People are interested, and then even shows like Stranger Things have made the hobby seem
Oh, sure.
accessible and cool again. So, from you watching this, and knowing you're part of this huge day that celebrates us as the tabletop role-playing community, I guess, Paul, one of the questions I want to ask you is, where does your role-playing journey start? Because obviously you're a dork like me, but where does your dorkiness begin? Are we talking like original AD&D, something weird like GURPS, maybe Shadowrun, BattleTech, the Five Rings? Where do you start?
1979, Advanced Dungeons and
Oh boy.
Dragons.
Oh, gee. All right. So tell me
I
about your
turned
first experiences.
I turned 50 years old this year.
What?
So at the ripe old age of, I guess I would have been 5. I have a brother who's 7 years older than me. And I had already been exposed to the animated Hobbit movie, and things like, The Last Unicorn were coming up and things like that. A lot of that late 70s, early 80s fantasy that was sort of part of the culture. Well, my brother was a Dungeons and Dragons player. And I have a very distinct memory, and I've told this story in many, many forums, but I have a very distinct memory of my brother sitting on my brother's lap as a small child, looking through the AD&D Monster Manual. And one particular night, I'm not sure what had happened. I was 5, who knows? But I threw up on the Blink Dog. So I still have those original AD&D books, and if you look very carefully under the precise kind of light, you can see a faint brown stain on the Blink Dog, and that is 5-year-old Paul's vomit. So I was actually playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as a 5-year-old. My brother taught me how to play. I created some characters, and sometimes we'd only play for an hour or whatever. But at 5 years old, I was playing AD&D, and there was no looking back.
Wow.
I played AD&D up until probably 6 or 9 months before second edition came out, and right around the time is when I discovered Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition, which I immediately fell in love with. And then Shadowrun released in 1989, and Shadowrun is probably one of my longest love affairs. I played first through third edition religiously, and I had a campaign that lasted for 17 years. We played every Monday night for 17 years,
Oh, wow.
and it had an ending. It didn't just peter out; the thing ended. But from there, I mean, I've been all over the place. I mean, I dabbled in live action vampire in the '90s, and kind of all over that from then. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, so the One Ring became a huge passion of mine after first edition came out. But I've had my fingers in all kinds of stuff. But it definitely starts with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in the late '70s, and I was a very small kid.
Man, I gotta say, you have no idea how excited that makes me to hear you had that long a Shadowrun game. I myself, very similar path to you. I played first edition through third edition, and then I'm trying to get into the new stuff now. But 17 years. What is the story there? Dude, you have got my undivided attention right now.
So you can make the argument it sort of happened in three distinct arcs. And as you might expect, 1989 puts me in high school. So I was playing with high school friends. After high school, some of those friends moved away, and I kind of, we came to a sort of conclusion while some of the characters moved on or moved forward into the next story arc. And then fast forward many years later, some of my friends that had moved away to go to college or whatever moved back. So some of those characters came back, and there's a lot of big cyclical things that occurred. I used some of the published material, but a lot of it was my own devising, as you might expect. The thing I always point to, so there's a guy named Eric Wujcik, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, who's since passed away, but he did a lot of design work on Palladium's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and he designed Amber Dice List back in the day. One of my first Gen Cons in like 92 or so, he taught a course, or it was like a seminar on long-term campaign design. And I took those notes with me and I carried them forward for another, 15 years or whatever, as to how to make this thing last forever and keep people's interest. Yeah, I mean, without getting too far into the weeds, that's the long and short of it. I had players come and go, characters come and go. Some died, some went away because the player moved away, and then they came back. But it was really satisfying, and people, I find it humorous because there are, for that long a period of time, obviously you've got some stories sort of deeply ingrained on you, and there are characters, NPCs or whatever, that exist only in the minds of a few people, but lived for a very long time. So it's one of my gaming one of my gaming triumphs, as it were. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
like 17 years. That's incredible, especially in a system like Shadowrun, because that world has world events that happen quite often, like Bug City, the Renraku arcology
oh yeah, all that
shutdown,
stuff.
the
Yeah.
meteorite that changed everything. It's astounding, and it's really cool just to hear that games like that continue. Like, for example, in my own role play history, I think my longest Shadowrun game was maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and I've never been able to recapture that magic since then. But it's really encouraging just to hear about these long running games. I'm in a game right now with a few friends of mine. It'd be over a year coming this October, and it's unbelievable how good it feels to play in a long term game that doesn't just kind of peter out after a little while. But that kind of
Sure.
transitions into my next question. So as a hobbyist and a retailer, what are some of the things that you see about some of the people who come into the store? Like, do you ever have someone who showed up one year and then they come back the next year and like they have their own kind of stories? People who like, oh man, I came in on a whim. I didn't really know what to think. They come back a year later. Now they're full blowing, like I'm a level 13 fighter sort of thing.
Well, I mean that sort of happens all year round, honestly. I mean, my store is very large, and I'm outside of Baltimore, Maryland, so I'm in a very population dense area. And being a large store, I tend to be a destination for a lot of folks, which is to say, they might live 30, 40 minutes away and have a friendly local game store that they go to more regularly. But because my store is so big and I carry so much stuff, they will make special trips to me throughout the year, whether it's tax season or a pre-release for something or the holidays or whatever. And not only that, but in our, we recently relocated to a new space in October, and we in our previous space, we in addition to kind of outgrowing it, we were kind of in like kind of the armpit end of the town, which is to say the gamers were finding us, but as more and more, to your point about something like Stranger Things, where Dungeons and Dragons was becoming part of the popular conversation amongst normies or muggles or whatever you want to call them, and board games in particular that have been blowing up, and really sort of the way that people talk about board games has changed a lot in the last 10 or 12 years. So much of our success and our growing success at the store was from folks that would never use the word gamer to describe themselves, despite the fact that they might play Ticket to Ride or they might play Dungeons and Dragons. So getting into this new location, we're kind of out in the open and on the main drag of the town, and we've got more folks that sort of find us, just sort of stumble on us. So to your original question, it's almost every week we're talking to people that are being freshly exposed to role playing. And I think particularly when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, it's funny you mentioned X, prior to or Twitter or whatever, prior to it's sort of slow death that it's in right now. A lot of the conversation about role playing games was happening there. And what I find fascinating as somebody who owns a big store is that there's a bubble that exists with people talking about role playing games online, whether it's anything from suggesting that Dungeons and Dragons is taking all the air out of the room and it's not giving, nobody's playing any independent stuff because of it, or whether it's, the hardcore gamers complaining about, the open gaming license drama that happened last year. The reality is most people that are buying and playing Dungeons and Dragons for me aren't having those conversations. They are not people that would use the word gamer to describe themselves. So it's really interesting to watch these conversations occur of people, making these absolute sort of statements, but really they're only referring to gamers. And my experience is very different. In fact, there was one thread I can remember, people talking about how nobody was playing independent games because of Dungeons and Dragons. And I comment, I said, my experience is the exact opposite, which is anytime Dungeons and Dragons is doing very well, every other game does well as well. Does it's the rising tide lifts all boats thing. And people tried to tell me I was a liar, and I said, well, I've got 25 years of retail data to back up my point. every time, and this is across the board, right? And when Magic the Gathering is doing well, other trading cards do well. When Warhammer 40K is doing well, other miniatures games do well, because there will always be those people that get a little burned out and they want to try something new, or always those people that don't want to play the popular thing, so they want to find something else to get involved in. So there's right now we are, to your point, at a moment where the conversation about role-playing games is at an all-time high, whether it's the post-Stranger Things effect or whether it's Critical Role. People are aware of and are talking about role-playing games in a way that would have seemed like a dream when I was a child. We had to go find the dark corner of the Barnes and Noble or the B. Dalton to find our shrink-wrapped ADD modules or what have you, if we were lucky. So nerd culture is popular culture now. I mean, you only need to look to the success of the Marvel movies and Star Wars to it's the nerds won. So I feel like I'm talking to people that are new to gaming and new to role playing almost every day.
Now, one of the cool things that Free RPG Day does is you mentioned a lot of independent role-playing games, stuff that a lot of people haven't necessarily heard of. And the package I received from Steve was like 20 pounds, so not exactly light. And there was a whole
I think it was heavier than that.
Oh my God. So there was like this huge stack of stuff that I got from a lot of these companies I've never seen before. Like, yeah, there's your usual WizKids, there's your Paizo in there, there's your, I think there was something from Catalyst Game Labs, from Free League Publishing, like all these big companies that people have now heard of because of their IP acquirement, stuff like that. What are some of your favorite ones that are coming out in this year's pack as games that people may not necessarily have heard of?
Well, so I mean, first and foremost, I always want to give a shout out to Level One, which is the indie game anthology that we do in conjunction with ninth level games. When we took over Free RPG Day, maybe that's a separate conversation, but we were trying to get rid of a lot of the stuff that was very small press that looked like maybe it was made in somebody's basement. Which whatever, rock on, that stuff's awesome. But I don't know that those folks really get a bang for their buck for what they're doing to be part of Free RPG Day. And as we were trying to raise the bar, we realized we were also raising the barrier to entry for a lot of these funky little weird indie things. So the solution became, in working with ninth level, who we're very close with, we're friendly with, we created Level One, the adventure anthology that is now in its fifth volume this year. It'll be the fifth time we've done it, which is the it's a book of 1 to 3 or 4 page RPGs from a bunch of indie designers. So a lot of folks, I try to point that out to everybody every year because there's so much content in that little booklet, and there's just a pile of games in there every year. So that's one of the things that really jumps out to me, and I really try to sort of draw people's attention to every year. Um, the other thing I'm excited about, so the other two things that jump out at me, well, let's go three. I mean, the story engine stuff. Um,
Yeah.
that's something that I personally backed on when they were doing crowdfunding, and we're carrying their product in the store now. So they've got some sample decks in there for the story engine deck in the kit that some people will be exposed to their sort of story prompt accessories. And as a game master, I love story prompt stuff. I don't necessarily want a pre-written adventure, although those things are cool, but I really like using everything from dice to tarot cards to anything else as a sort of structure to spark my imagination and my ad-libbing on the fly. So that story engine stuff is really cool. The other two things that I'm excited about are Red Raven, mostly known for board games, but they are doing a preview of their Arzium RPG, which is the setting of all of their very popular games like Above and Below and Near and Far and things like that. They've got a real unique vibe and look, and the art style is has its own thing. And then Rowan Rook and Descartes. These are folks that over the last couple of years have really elevated the indie space with their games like Spire or Eat the Reichs that just came out, and they've got a preview of a game called The Hollows, which is they describe it as fantasy boss fights done right. So there's some really interesting things that they're doing with sort of final battle type stuff in that game. It's a lot of hunting down demons with terrifying weapons and things like that. But that's the stuff that's got my eye this year. Red Raven, Rowan Rook and Descartes, Story Engine, and of course I always point people towards Level One.
Yeah, it's been an exciting time, especially for me, because as you mentioned, Story Engine, the designer and some people involved from that team live remarkably close to me in the next town over in Kitchener, Waterloo. So if you want to go check out that interview, providing everything went right, you should be able to go back into our archives and go check that out, guys. So yeah, Paul, I guess that's some of my final questions to you, because I know you've got a lot of prep because tomorrow morning's gonna come and the dorks will be coming. So because you've been in the retail space for so long, I think you've been around since what, 2000, give or take?
So the store has been in business for 2000. I took over running it in 2010.
Okay.
But I come from corporate retail. I did my time in everything from regional record store chains to fashion. But I've been in retail for a real long time. But I've been in game retail full time since 2010.
So the reason I ask this, because I've got friends of mine who own comic book stores and bookstores and stuff like that, and I always like to ask them, what is the weirdest and most unusual thing you found in a back room that, like, oh, maybe I should have sold that? Like, for example, have you ever found like an unopened box of, I don't know, magic boosters or Pokemon cards, or maybe a D&D book from the 90s that's still shrink wrapped?
So it doesn't happen much anymore. But I mean, there was a time in the early days when I was taking over from old management, when we found, I think it was a half dozen moats. It's a magic card. Man, I don't even know what they go for now, but at the time they weren't cheap. But we found a half dozen moats that had fallen behind a shelf.
Wow.
Yeah, and yeah, let's see if I can. Yeah, it looked like these days they go for about $400 a piece.
Oh, wow.
So this was quite some time ago, but even then they were three figures. They're very valuable. So we just found a half dozen of these things that had fallen, that had fallen behind a shelf, and I was like, aren't these worth a lot of money? I'm like, oh yeah. So beyond that, because I do sell used role playing games, I buy and sell used role playing games. It's always fun when you buy something that's 20, 30, 40 years old, and you've already made the purchase and you're prepping it for the shelf or whatever, and you open the thing up and you find somebody's character sheet,
Oh,
from
man.
or somebody's graph paper with a dungeon, drawn out on it on pencil and like some notes in the margins. That's the stuff that I always think is super cool.
Yeah, same here. I love finding old role play stuff. And if I might share a brief story with you, a couple of years ago, one of my friends was just driving around the back roads of southern Ontario, as one does when they go garage sailing, and they came across a milk crate on the side of the road.
Oh, milk
Nothing,
crate.
nothing too innocuous, but okay, sure. So they roll up to this milk crate. It has, I'm not shitting you when I say this, an original D&D white box in
Nice.
fairly good condition, a AD&D trivia board game I've never seen before, a crap ton of Forgotten Realms stuff from probably AD&D second edition and first edition, and a Deities and Gods first edition with Cthulhu in it.
Yep, and Delric.
Yeah, and Delric just sitting on the side of the road. I
Nice.
was I was able to turn around. I kept that in my collection for a couple of years. I had to sell some of that stuff for a wheelchair repair a couple of years ago. That D&D box, it was in pretty good shape, but not the greatest. I sold that for $700.
That doesn't suck.
Yeah, and I was like so surprised. Like people throw this stuff away or they resell it. I've seen people locally on Facebook Marketplace just selling D&D stuff. And you're right though. Sometimes when you buy stuff secondhand, you see memories, you see character sheets. Like I've got some character sheets that are still left in some old Shadowrun stuff that I picked up like 10 or 15 years ago, and I don't want to let it go because I'm thinking it's still legible. This character doesn't look too nuts. I mean, that's an NPC if I ever want to use one.
Right?
And it's just like it's amazing just the memories that we wrap up in these role-playing games here. So, Paul, I got to say it has been an absolute pleasure to talk with someone who's been involved in the industry for so long, someone who celebrates the hobby as much as you do. So, if anybody local wanted to find you, where would they have to go?
Well, so my store is located in Glen Burnie, Maryland. We're very close to BWI Airport. In fact, I have customers that live nowhere near here, but they pass through BWI for work, so they stop in a few times a year. So we're a little less than 15 minutes from BWI Airport. If you want to come see us in person, we got a 25,000 square foot store, of which I think about 14,000 of that is sales floor. So it's absolutely enormous. People come in and they say, "I've never seen a game store this big," and I say, "There aren't game stores this big. There's only a couple, and I can tell you exactly who they all are." So if you're in the area, that's where we are. We're just south of Baltimore City, near the airport.
And then online, your website is gamesandstuffonline.com.
Yep, and gamesandstuff.com will take you there too. Yep.
Fantastic. And if people want to check out you on eBay, they also have that option as well. I did take a browse through some of your stuff. I need more money. So anyway, guys, it has been a fantastic time. Paul, I really sincerely hope we get a chance to talk with you again, perhaps maybe for next year. We'll have
Sure,
to wait and
absolutely.
see. But guys, like I said, please go to your local game stores. Please check out Free RPG Day. That is tomorrow, June 22nd, 2024. Get tons of free stuff. There is an awesome dice bag. There's a dice tray, tons of RPGs you've never heard of before, stuff that could be used at your own game table. Personally, I'm recommending Renegade Game Studios has something in there that combines My Little Pony, Transformers, and G.I. Joe and Power Rangers into one adventure. I also saw something from Free League Publishing. I think they do Dragon's Bane, plus the indie stuff that was mentioned. Please check this stuff out. And if your local game store is not participating this year, just ask them, and maybe they will be doing it next year. So, guys, I hope you are going out there. You're rolling crits, be they critical ones or critical 20s. It doesn't matter. Go out there, have fun. We'll have Paul back next year here on the show. So until next time, this has been Botched Roll. I've been Mike the Birdman saying, may all your rolls be criticals. We'll catch you guys again next time right here on ThisWeekInGeek.net.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at ThisWeekInGeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@ThisWeekInGeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.